Can I start? Okay, well, thank you for inviting me, first of all. It's very in the same room in which I did my PhD was completed here. So very nice memories in this room. And let's hope the good memories will continue today for you and for me. Right, so as Liori said, this presentation would be about growing up or becoming bilingual a bit later in life, and the effect on the brain, behavior, and education. And in particular, I wanted to address four main questions here. The first one is this one: is bilingualism or multilingualism? And in my presentation, I will use bilingualism and multilingualism, but they mean the same thing. Huh? Good or bad? And the second question would be about the bilingual advantage hypothesis. So what is it? The third question will address the fact that the multilingual brain may be different or better. We don't know. We will see. I'll try to answer this question. And the last question is, can the language in use change our decisions, emotions, and even personality? At the end of the presentation, I will show you some examples of multilingual pedagogy, and I would like to reflect upon this example with you and start a discussion on this. Right, so let's kick off with the first question. Is learning a second language good or bad? Well, the answer to this question, I think it's obvious. It's a yes. There is no other option here. And when I ask this question to students and colleagues who are not familiar with bilingual research, they, of course, they say yes. We are here, we are maybe all bilinguals, even in this room, and our guests online. We wouldn't be here if we wouldn't know English. Well, obviously, it's very good for professional, for social cultural interaction, integration, everything, right? But when I add this, is bilingualism good or bad for cognitive development? This is where I see some, perplexities within the audience. And why is that? Well, when I started my PhD a few years ago, as Michael well knows, I found some interesting quotations from the literature. And this quotation now, I'm going to show it to you. First one, now I need to read it, but I've got all these pictures here. Is there a way that we can close the... We can move it, I can't remember it by heart. I'm sorry, but I need to read. So this is the first quotation that I found. And it says, the simultaneous learning of two languages and mental retardation, which is a very, very nice word, which impedes the learning of other subjects, so math, science, whatever. And this quotation was taken from, sorry, it doesn't work this, okay. It was, as you can see, 1941 of educational research. So it's a scientific journal. Can I use this? Maybe. Yeah. The second quotation is, my child's teacher said that raising my child bilingual will significantly delay his linguistic and cognitive development. The teacher discouraged me and my husband to speak two languages at home. And this was something that I experienced directly because I was a concerned parent a few years ago. We're not talking about 1941, we are talking about 2019. And the last quotation that I wanted to show you is this one. Children who are acquiring English as a second language, even coming from an advanced background, will take between 5 to 7 years to become competent academically with the language. And this sentence was, I don't know if you can see who said that.
Professor in child language acquisition.
Yes, a professor in child language acquisition delivering a talk to primary school teachers who, after the talk, were absolutely terrified about this because they said, well, we have a large number of bilingual children in our classroom. and they will catch up with everybody else in 5-7 years. Oh my God. So we should just chuck them away from the classroom because they would drag our, the results of our school down. So taken together, we can just say that bilingualism is bad. It's disgusting. Yeah. But let's see other quotation. They are, saying exactly the opposite. The first one is bilinguals are more facile at concept formation and have greater mental flexibility than monolinguals. And this is something in the psychological monograph, General and Applied in 1962, which is a very significant date, not only because I was born, but also because there was the first seminal pioneering paper in Canada showing that actually there was some kind of bilingual advantage. And the paper is from Pell and Lambert in 1962, just if you want the reference of it. Now, the second quotation is bilingualism accelerates the development of a general cognitive function concerned with attention. And this is in the handbook of bilingualism, but it's also in many, many papers that are addressing this kind of question. And the third quotation is lifelong bilingualism confers protection against the onset of Alzheimer's disease or dementia. Nice, because almost on that side of life. So yeah, I would be very happy if yeah, you know what I mean anyway. And this is in neurology in 1910. So here, bilingualism is good. Fantastic. Right, but what is the scientific evidence apart from this quotation? So what do we know about bilingualism or multilingualism? Let's see. First of all, let's focus on multilingualism and neurotypical development. Okay, so the first thing to say is that there is no evidence that raising children in bilingual environment is whatsoever detrimental for their cognitive development. And this is, something that I also found in my own studies. And here there are some references. There is actually some evidence that may suggest that bilingualism might be enhancing some kind of attentional processes. And this is what is called the bilingual advantage, and we will address this point in the following slides. These kind of findings are mainly related to the work of Bialystok. So Bialystok is, Ellen Bialystok in Canada is the big name in this line of research. And there is also some evidence that using multiple languages, but all over the lifespan, may have a kind of protective effect on neurodegenerative disorders. So this is the link with Alzheimer and dementia. And this is shown with the behavioral data, secondary data analysis, and also neuroimaging data. Now, let's see when children with developmental disorders are raised in a multilingual environment. So there is no evidence, even in that part, in that area, that raising children, in very difficult circumstances may add an extra level of complexity on top of what is already there. Okay, so we shouldn't really discourage parents of children growing with neurodiversity because there is no scientific evidence that this can be detrimental. Actually, more recently, there is a growing body of research that is showing positive effect of raising atypically developing children in bilingual environments. And especially, these studies are quite interesting because they show that in specific circumstances with, for example, the autism spectrum disorder, maybe more on the higher functioning spectrum, there are improvements in social interaction. So, which is obviously a domain that is not is particularly critical in ASD children. And what about education? So education, there is a label here, EAL. EAL stands for English as an additional language. I don't like it. It's vaguely discriminatory. Yeah. But anyway, this is what we use in this country to identify children with English as a second language. And there is a perception that these children are actually, you know, a burden for the schools. And, you know, the perception that they have poor attainment is completely false, because a recent report by Hutchinson shows clearly that EAL pupils have identical attainment compared to the national average. And actually, they are more likely to achieve the English baccalaureate than native speakers of English. So even the fact that, you know, they may need to catch up a little bit, you know, because if they, especially if they are children of people immigrating in this country, obviously they need some kind of intervention from the teachers in order to catch up with the language. But academically, it doesn't really take 5-7 years. At least this is what this report is showing. So we should probably, especially when we talk with teachers and education professionals, we should be very careful with statements that generalize too much and generalize on the negative side rather than on the real facts. Right, so what is the bilingual advantage hypothesis? And this is a nice picture of Ellen Bialystok in Canada. As I said, Ellen is a pioneer of bilingual research. She started in the 80s, I think, and her work was systematic and consistent across many years, and you know, it resulted in the bilingual advantage hypothesis that, in very simplistic words, can be summarizing with this statement. So bilinguals, as you know, they speak multiple languages, at least 2. And in order to produce one language, they need to suppress the other one. That's for sure. This is what I'm doing now, and what if you are bilingual, you do all the time. So this constant inhibition, activation of languages, which is also supported by a theoretical model that is being developed here, UCL by David Green, the control model, may result in a cognitive overtraining. So it's like taking your brain to the gym every day and even every night, because when we dream in 2 languages, so we never stop dreaming or switching between languages. And this cognitive overtraining may produce some kind of benefit that go beyond the language system. Okay, so here the bilingual advantage hypothesis concerns something that is essentially non-verbal, especially in selective attention or general executive function processing. And again, Ellen was one of the first scientists that analyzed some clinical data in Canada of Alzheimer's patients, trying to identify and select the bilingual patient with the monolingual patients. And she was the first to discover that probably, the bilingual patients reported the onset of Alzheimer's on average 4 or 5 years later than the monolingual. So that's why this initiated the hypothesis that lifelong bilingualism may protect the brain as well. I think you are all familiar with the concept of cognitive reserve, which is not linked necessarily to multilingualism. I mean, if we age healthy, we eat well, we have good physical exercise, good interaction with people, these are all the ingredients that will contribute to healthy aging. Ellen added bilingualism on top of everything that is included already in the concept of cognitive reserve. And of course, we all hope that this is true. But we don't know really. So there are some issues with the bilingual advantage hypothesis. And these are because differences between bilinguals and monolinguals are not always found. And, you know, I just mentioned some of these authors that are questioning the bilingual advantage hypothesis. Studies in Spain, in the United States, in England, me. They did meta-analysis like Letton and Lowes in Canada. And, well, we didn't find, with large sample of participants. With small sample participants, it's a different kind of story. You may find some kind of executive function advantages, but when the samples are large, there is no real difference between bilinguals and monolinguals. Here for bilinguals, generally we talk about native bilinguals. So people who learn 2 languages since birth, not late bilinguals like me, who learn a second language in adolescence. So when the bilingual advantage are found, as I said, are very specific, are restricted to maybe small samples or a specific population. So basically it's not clear why and when and where this bilingual advantage can be detected. These are some reflections that I do. This is my personal opinion, so you may agree or disagree. I hope you agree, but if you disagree, I don't take it personally. I use the term advantage in my papers as well, and my also co-author in this paper, so he's you know, my accomplice. But I don't like it anymore. It's like I don't like EAL label for, yeah. When there is an advantage, there is also a disadvantage, first of all, and which is something that we don't see. So advantage is misleading, is a word that is already misleading. And is also misleading for the general public, I mean, and also for the teachers, that because, you know, it does not refer to multilingualism as a whole, right? So when I ask you, is bilingualism good or bad? It's good, so it's an advantage. That's it, full stop. But the bilingual advantage hypothesis refers to a very niche kind of area, which is the advantage in executive function, right? Which is a concept that maybe the general public doesn't understand, unless, of course, we explain clearly what it is. And the advantage that is being detected that reach a significant statistical level is just milliseconds. So what has this to do with, you know, everyday life? What kind of advantage it is? So we don't know, really. I remember I saw a talk, and when the presenter was asked this question, criticizing this millisecond thing, he gave a clever answer. He said, well, in some cases, a millisecond can save your life. Yes, I agree with that. In some cases, like driving a car, you know, avoiding an accident, whatever. Yes, but I don't have any scientific proof that this happened, really. So we don't know. Right, but what I know is that it caused a scientific controversy, and this didn't help actually the understanding and the knowledge exchange between scientists and people, right? So I read magazines, newspapers, non-scientific publications. That's, you know, they were just reporting everything, saying, oh, there is an advantage, bilinguals, they have better sex. What I mean, maybe. Yeah, I mean, there are titles. I didn't put the titles here because I wanted to be polite. So it's an oral presentation, but yeah, I can send you the actual references of people saying everything and more than everything inaccurately about this bilingual advantage. So bilinguals were superhumans, but they're not, right? But more importantly, it caused really a clash between scientists. So there was a bitter kind of interaction and debate between people who thought that the bilingual advantage existed and people who didn't. I mean, our main goal as scientists is to find evidence, right? So we don't need to get married with a kind of, line of thought. For me, what it counts is the evidence. It's not Bialystock what it says or Prof what it says. If the evidence is telling me that there is a bilingual advantage in executive function, that's fine. I have no problem to admit it. And I don't know, current, but it's not the current, the electricity. Current research is moving forward to explore the effects of multilingualism, not advantages or disadvantages. Well, obviously, there can be positive or less positive effects, but we're talking about effects. So no more title, the bilingual advantage in our papers, right? Okay. Right, so some findings from my lab, the Multilanguage and Cognition lab. By the way, Multec is the name that was given by the late Annette Camilo Smith, and I'm not going to change it forever until I retire. Okay, that's relevant to the language acquisition, but this is a fact. So there are two studies in which we found some kind of positive cognitive effects of bilingual upbringing, especially in low socioeconomic status participants. And obviously, these studies are quite important because if they are true, well, we can actually focus on that particular population and kind of also design some intervention in school for non-bilingual people in disadvantaged environments. So, okay, so I wanted just to give you some key results from the two studies. The first one was done in 2018, and these are the authors. Ferike Thomas is not Michael Thomas in this case. Sorry, is the lady. It was my postdoc. Okay, so what we did was to test 90 participants from a school in Dagenham in London. This school has pupils from different backgrounds. They are asylum seekers, refugees, so low socioeconomic status. And they are bilinguals, but they're also English monolinguals with low socioeconomic status. And we compared their performance on executive function task, and maybe you are familiar with the Simon task, which is one of the most used tasks in this line of research. We compared these results with high socioeconomic status participants that I tested part of my other project. Okay, so the key results were that low socioeconomic status bilinguals were significantly faster than monolinguals in executive function task. And this is what happened. As you can see, the low socioeconomic status were faster, both with congruent trials, they are the easy trials, but also with incongruent trials that are more difficult. So this is kind of graph that will replicate, if you compare it with, with one of Bialystock kind of studies showing a bilingual advantage in bilingualism as a whole, right? But here, as you can see, for the high socioeconomic status participants, the results were comparable, okay? So it looks like there is no effect in high socioeconomic status individuals, but if there is a positive effect, is for low socioeconomic status individuals. Now, what we had, I don't know if this is, sorry. I need to learn that actually I can read there. Right, so, yeah, but I said, anyway, so it's fine. So let's see study 2. And Michael's here this time, okay. Michael's here because this is a secondary data analysis in collaboration with Imperial College and Berkeley. So they kindly gave me a database of, thousands of participants, together with another co-author, Andrea Ciccolini. We filter out all the missing data, all the socioeconomic status. So we did some filtering work, and we ended up in having 517 monolinguals, English monolinguals, and 329 bilinguals. They were adolescents from London schools, and they were tested with a battery of cognitive tasks. Now, I have to say that the study was actually not related to language whatsoever. The study and the database was related to the use of mobile phones in teenagers, okay, and the effect that this has on cognitive development. But there were some kind of linguistic information as well. So we could identify the bilinguals with the monolinguals, socioeconomic status low and high. And this is what we did. One thing that was really nice in this database is that all pupils were tested twice. So it's a kind of longitudinal analysis. So the time 1 is 11, 12 years old, and time 2 is 13, 15 years old. And what we found here as a key result, there was a general benefit of bilingualism, regardless of socioeconomic status, and especially in 3 areas: in working memory, visual spatial processing, and nonverbal reasoning. But I think the most significant result and interesting result that is kind of comparable with the other study that I show you, which was with the older adults, right? So here they are adolescents, the other one were young adults, is that through development, there was an improvement of working memory abilities, but only in the low socioeconomic status group. So here there is the bilingual and the monolingual, and this was significant. You don't see it here, but I can see here. The P is 0.004. Wow. Yeah. So obviously, I should mention, because we need to be fair, that the study was obviously large sample, which is good. The analysis was rigorous. The only limitation that I can see is that we didn't have much linguistic information about bilinguals, but because this study originally was not designed for linguistic purposes. So this is the limitation that is being also acknowledged by Kempap, who liked the study. Kempap is one of the most critical voices for the bilingual advantage hypothesis. And we've been added also in his recent book. So we are in the publication, but he said, yeah, Filippi et al. Found this kind of interesting result, but the study had limitations. Yeah, but I acknowledge the limitation. Yeah, we'll improve, don't worry. Right. Okay, so I think many of you are familiar with this. And I would like to introduce the concept of bilingualism and the brain. Okay, so this is nothing to do with bilingualism. This is just the 20th century model of language processing based on post-mortem. So these are all, people who died and they were aphasics. And the problem after postmortem was associated with a particular area of the brain that presented the damage. So now we know that production is in the kind of prefrontal part of the brain, that comprehension of language is in the auditory cortex. Then there are also other areas for visual form of words, visual input. And this line here in the middle between the two yellow areas is called arcuate fasciculus, which is the link between comprehension and production of language. All these in 95% of the population is left lateralized. Okay, so we know that the model obviously is still influential, but we also know that it is a bit more complex, and this comes with more recent neuroscientific research, especially with Matty Price, UCL. Now, I'm not going to go into detail of that very complicated picture, but as you can see, I mean, it's not just 4 areas, it's much more complex than this. Anyway, this is the brain of an adult. You know, can be monolingual, can be bilingual. We don't know. It's just the 21st century model of language process. Now, one question that many people ask me all the time is that, oh, I speak German and English. Do I have separate areas for the 2 languages? No. So the answer is no. And this has been shown with several studies. I'll just show you this with from our colleague IOE Parker Jones. I think he's still working in Oxford, right? IOE, yeah. And he showed a few years ago that bilinguals and monolinguals, they largely share the same areas for language processing. Obviously, this is quite simplistic, and it's more complicated than that. There are some layers, they are different, but the network is very similar, right? So we don't have an area for Italian or an English in the brain. We process Italian and English in the same parts. And then there is a nice concept of brain plasticity. Brain plasticity, as you know, is associated with experience. So if I start today to learn the piano, my brain would change because I will form new connections, new motor functions, and attentional functions, memory, whatever associated with the specific experience that I'm doing. And learning a new language, of course, is a new experience. So it will produce effects on the brain. So if you ask me if the multilingual brain is different, well, I would say, yes, it is different. But if you ask me if the bilingual brain is better than a monolingual one, no, there is no scientific evidence that is showing that. So if the bilingual advantage expressed in milliseconds in behavioral studies would cause some kind of positive effects in the brain, it should be visible also in neuroimaging, but actually it is not. So there is nothing that suggested that the multilingual brain is better than a monolingual brain, as far as I know. Maybe tomorrow will be. So there are some studies showing structural and functional differences in the brain. This is probably the first one. I remember I saw Andrea McKelly on TV, on the BBC at that time, 2005, I think, because he published this paper on nature, which is everything, and everybody would aim to do that, but not all of us can actually do it. You did it, yeah. I know. Yeah. I serve it on a silver tray, you know. Gold, right? But anyway, Andrea McKelly was a postdoc student at that time in Cathy Price's group, and he kind of designed this voxel-based morphometry studies analyzing just the structure of the brain. And he found that in proficient bilinguals, this area of the brain, which is related to the inferior parietal cortex, had more density. Density means more gray matter, more body cells in this particular area. And it was positive correlated with proficiency, but negatively correlated with age of acquisition. So the earlier you acquire the language, the better. But if you acquire the language later, the density decreased. That was really nice study showing brain plasticity and differences in the brain. But all these participants were bilinguals. Okay. Another thing that we did, and we provided novel data actually. So, yeah. Nobody knew that the cerebellum is also involved in a kind of bilingual control of interference. This was done with the task that, if you're familiar with the concept of cocktail party effect. So when you are in an environment with lots of noise and you have to filter out noise and pay attention to the target, we did it this task outside the scanner, of course, because the scanner is already noisy. So yeah. And then we did voxel-based morphometry to these participants and found, to our surprise, that an area of the cerebellum called the paravermis, it was correlated with control of verbal interference. Now, the first study was in 2011, and I did it when I was doing a PhD. When finally, after 9 years, I got some money to to continue with this line. Yeah, neuroimaging cost a lot of money. We replicated this, but this time comparing monolinguals with bilinguals, and we found that actually, but the people logged in and they see the full screen. Okay, so we found that there is an increased volume this time, not just gray matter density, but volume bilaterally in the cerebellum. So two kind of novel data. First study only using bilinguals and seeing that more proficient bilinguals had more gray matter density only in one part of the right posterior paravermis. But in the second study, comparing monolinguals and bilinguals and a larger sample, we saw that this is also bilateral and regards more volume rather than gray matter density. Okay. Now, I should be a bit faster, though. Should I?
Like 10, 15 minutes.
But we can go beyond the time. I can stay here until midnight. Maybe you don't want. So, can the language in use change our decision-making, judgment, and personality? Yes. Bilingual research has shown that this is possible. And there are many studies actually showing that bilinguals, when they process the language, the information in the second language, they have different outcomes. Okay. And the interpretation of this is that probably, well, almost certainly, the non-native language contains less emotional load. So, in turn, bilinguals or multilinguals will be more rational. And this is called the foreign language effect. So, being more rational is nice, is good, because you take the emotion aside. So emotion sometimes can cause troubles, but for bilinguals, according to these studies, it doesn't. So they are more inclined to opt out for short outcome instead of taking risk. So risk aversion. They reduce causality between two events that are not related, and suppresses. So this is what some studies show. And research also showed that bilinguals perceive dishonesty. This is not very nice, but they perceive dishonesty less inappropriate. Okay, so they could become politicians. I didn't say that. Oh my God. And they also perceive crimes described in the foreign language as less severe. So they definitely can become politicians. And this is the one that I like. They definitely prefer to swear in their native language. I don't know you, maybe you don't swear, of course, because they're all polite. I do swear sometimes because they say that swearing is an indication of intelligence. So I'm very intelligent on that side. But I swear anytime because in English it doesn't make, I don't have the same satisfaction, right? So okay. For me, the F word or other words are just saying table, bottle, whatever. But when I say that in Italian, it's really nice. Yes. Is it the same for you, by the way?
No.
No, because you are very proficient in all the languages, you know.
But different situations demand different swear words. And different
Really?
different words.
That's interesting. I need to study the Ollie's brain.
I watched the tennis players at Wimbledon who English is the second language. They do seem to swear in English.
Because they don't have the same kind of sense of the gravity of what they say, probably. Yeah, but they're very proficient as well in swearing, so maybe there is no real difference. Yeah, yeah, but with me, I prefer the Italian part. Anyway, right, so let's talk about tolerance of ambiguity. Are you familiar with this? Yes, good, you're the first one. So, okay, fantastic. So can just go. Tolerance of ambiguity is a personality trait, and Adrian Burnham from UCL is the one that covered this on the business psychology side, on the organizational psychology side. So it's very interesting to read some literature on tolerance of ambiguity. And anyway, in simplistic words, is a tendency to perceive ambiguous situation as desirable. And there are three main attributes: novelty, a new situation with no familiar cues; complexity, complex situation with large numbers of cues; or insolubility, contradictory situation with conflicting cues. People with low tolerance of ambiguity levels have been found to be more stressed. Are you stressed? Yeah. To be more impulsive, and of course to avoid ambiguity. They don't like ambiguous situations, right? And TOA is also negatively correlated with measure of rigidity, authoritarianism, Machiavellianism, wow, and dogmatism. So basically, people with low level of tolerance to ambiguity are not very nice citizens, are not very nice managers, are not very nice professionals in general. So you need to be very careful with these people. I would test your managers before you accept a job. Right. So what this has to do with language. The tolerance ambiguity has been identified as a possible characteristic for good learning of a language. And as Rubin said, because such a learner is comfortable with uncertainty, right? So this is what bilinguals do. They constantly have to guess what's going on. And it's also been found to be a significant predictor of language proficiency. Is a bit more recent. And people with higher levels of tolerance ambiguity display more flexibility and adaptability when they have to deal with other people with foreign accents. Whereas low level of TOA triggers kind of harsher judgment of people with accents, perceiving less professional. So I hope all of you now have a very high level of tolerance of ambiguity, because otherwise I would be destroyed. Yeah. Okay. Right. So nice paper that I found in this line of investigation. is a relationship between tolerance of ambiguity and multilingualism. There is a paper by Jean-Marc Deval, and Liwei, IOE. They administer a questionnaire of tolerance of ambiguity, and these are some examples of the questions that are asked in this questionnaire to a lot of people. I think, I mean, more than 2,000 participants of 204 nationalities, so very large sample. And what they found was that participants knowing more languages, so 2, 3, 4 languages, but the threshold was 3, so there was no additive beneficial effect after 3, had significantly higher scores of tolerance of ambiguity. And more proficient people had higher scores. And those who were never been abroad, they had lower than tolerance of ambiguity. So obviously, I mean, the more you interact with people, the language you know, any kind of, define your levels of tolerance of ambiguity. So we did a study in collaboration with the University of Trento in Italy, very nice place that I suggest that you have a chance. And we studied the kind of different questions. So if there was a foreign language effect in tolerance of ambiguity. So what we did was to administer the same questionnaire that Deval and Liwei did in English. And we did it with almost 400 Italian-English bilinguals. And half of them, they did the questionnaire in English, and half of them, they did it in Italian. So we translated the questionnaire in Italian. And what we found was that processing information in L2, in this case in English, promoted higher scores of tolerance of ambiguity. Whereas with L1, the scores were lower. And age, so younger people, gender, females, and levels of proficiency were significant predictors of higher scores. So these are important factors. We also analyzed, because I mean, these participants were, scattered throughout the territory in Italy, north and south, mainly from the north, because Trento is near Germany. But there was not enough geographical distribution to understand if differences were also observed by location. This is something that we need to maybe do in a second. The paper is currently under review in the second cycle of review, so I think it's going to be published pretty soon, and you can read it, of course, by paying a small fee. Right. What we did, these are with adults, of course. What we did, we wanted to see if also children were tolerant of ambiguity, and when, from what age this kicks off. So we adapted the questionnaire and started administering to children as well. We haven't analyzed the data yet, but just to give you an example, this is what we did in order to make it more comprehensible to younger children. So this is kind of PowerPoint presentation in which we ask, you've been invited to your friend's birthday party, they have family there too, but you don't know anybody in that family. So, and the question is, which group do you prefer to play with the one that you are familiar with, or maybe with the new ones, and they need to decide which one. So the sense of the question was more or less the same as the adult questionnaire, but it was adapted for the children. And again, I don't know the results yet. We tested 100 children so far in Italy and in England as well. So we want to see also cultural differences, but I don't have the results yet. So next time.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is there a control in here for, say, autism or anything? Because it seems like, when you I think one of the questions earlier was like, I like to surround myself with familiar things and that sort of thing, and obviously, you know, neurodivergence can be
Yes.
a factor.
Yeah.
I just wondered if that was.
At the moment, they are all typically developing children. All typically developing. But this is, you know, a good question, because maybe the next step, once we know that there is maybe a trend or some kind of interesting result, we should extend it to the neurodiversity population. Neurodiverse population. Sorry, my English really, after 23 years, I'm still here. Anyway, just a few moments to reflect on the last part of this presentation, which is dedicated to multilingual pedagogy. And I wanted to give you 3 examples. One in primary school in Italy, one in a bilingual school in London, and another one still in London, but in a school completely different with EAL for children in a very disadvantaged area in East London. So let's start with the first one, and I show you some pictures of me pontificating in Italian. It was my first talk in Italian. Yeah, it was really weird because I'm not, you know, I studied psychology here, so I had to translate executive function with funzione esecutiva. Oh gosh, it was a, you know, a very challenging, demanding task. But anyway, yeah, I was invited to do a knowledge exchange activity with the Education Council in a region in Tuscany, in Italy. And all these people were primary school teachers. Okay. So I gave my talk, you know, it was good, whatever, executive function. And then I was basically attacked by these 100 people. They were so angry with me. No, the comments were, you know, yeah, but thank you for coming here from London. Fantastic, but now you should go back because because here we have real issues here. So many pupils, they come here in the deprived areas from you know, countries that they speak such different languages. They don't have any knowledge of Italian, and we are teachers. We are completely unaware, not equipped, untrained to face this challenge. We don't know what to do. The easy thing to do is just we say to the parents, and there is also difficulty to communicate with the parents because even the parents don't speak Italian. So we just say, look, we teach in Italian, we're in Italy, your child will be assessed in Italian, forget your language. We don't care what language you speak at home. We don't want to know. Here we speak Italian. That's it. Right? And I said, well, doing that, you completely, you know, cut away the cultural integration with people, with the extended family of these people. I mean, you don't preserve anything of their cultural heritage. And yeah, and I make them even more angry. So at that point I stopped because there were 100 people against one. So yeah, I said, okay, that's right, you're right. Anyway, the second example that I wanted to give you is a bilingual and bi-curricular education school that provides education from nursery to year 6. And they are in Holland Park. It's called UCL. It's an Italian-English school. And basically they divide the curriculum into Italian and English. And they have native speakers or teachers, native speakers of both languages as well. And they promote biliteracy. So this is not just bilingualism. For example, I mean, my children, they can speak 2 languages or 3 with Spanish as well, but they can just write and read in English. So they comprehend and speak in other languages, but in terms of literacy, they are literate just in English. Whereas these children here, they start learning 2 languages deeply, all right? And my lab is currently collaborating with this school and others. I've got some PhD students working with them, and the University of Florence as well. We are collaborating with them And we want to see the effect not just of bilingualism on social, emotional, and cognitive development, but the effect of biliteralism, which is a bit more. And I have to tell you that some results are quite interesting, although the sample is still small, but I had a look at the data, and it seems that there is a difference between bilingualism and biliteralism in terms of cognitive development. We'll see. The third and last example is from Kensington Primary School. Now, Kensington is not Kensington here, it's Kensington in Newham, right? So it's a bit misleading. And I met this wonderful lady, Sophia Amin, and she's a specialist in multilanguage education. And she gave me this statement that we can read together. Okay, so the children at Kensington Primary come from a wonderful array of backgrounds, nationalities consisting of around 50 languages. Many of these children have moved from abroad recently, and over 95% use English as an additional language. They have, I think, just less than 1,000 pupils. 90%, 95% are EAL. Here at Kensington, we have always put our children and their needs at the forefront of our vision, so we have made multilingualism part of our whole school approach. This approach encompasses a multilingual pedagogy in which all languages have equal status and are promoted through our ambitious curriculum and ethos. Translanguaging is part of teaching and learning. We hold a variety of first language after school clubs, and we use various methods of engaging with the community on the importance of home languages. And the last part, in keeping with our vision, we moved our language from EAL to multilingual learners. So here the label disappears, right? As we feel that this promotes an asset-based approach, focusing on pupil strengths and linguistic repertoire, and ensures that Kensington really is a place everyone loves to be. Wow, that's quite impressive, yeah? So, maybe some of you know Victoria Murphy, and she is the Director of Department of Education at Oxford, and she agrees with all of that, I mean, of course, but she points out a very important point. So we have research. This research can be descriptive, qualitative, but what is really missing is consistent data. We can say, oh, Kensington model is fantastic, but can it be scaled? Is it scalable to other kinds of situations? Are they doing well? But are they doing well because they have the specific kind of interaction and also competence teachers? The head teacher, Sophia, you know. So it's a pool of people that are really passionate about it. But if you don't have the same people, of course, maybe you are in the Italian situations in which there is a rejection of bilingualism. You know, we need collaborations with schools like Kensington to provide data. So, takeaway message, and this is almost the conclusion. First of all, no scientific evidence that multilingual delays cognitive development. This is the point that we need to consider. Actually, there is some evidence that might be beneficial for low socioeconomic status children, and it's very important that we do proper engagement with all players in the game. Okay, parents, teachers, and also scientists, of course, to provide the right message. Now, I've got lots of people to thank. Without them, I wouldn't be here. No. And I organize every year a knowledge exchange seminar series. This was concluded last week. All talks are recorded, so if you're interested, send me an email, I'll send you the link. And I'm thinking, thank you. 1 hour, sorry, maybe it was a bit too long.
There's one question in the chat
Only one.
that came so far. They came up when you were talking about the studies about the emotional processing and
Yeah.
swearing. And the question was, were those studies on consequent or simultaneous studies?
Oh my God, I don't remember. For sure, there is one study by Costa. It was multicultural study, so it was not just done in Spain, but different people with different countries, including in Israel, in Arabic, in Arab countries as well. They were all native speakers of language, I think. But there are also papers targeting, late bilinguals as well. I can't really tell you which, but we have all the references in the presentations. Yeah, you can dig it out.
Any questions in the audience?
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Yeah, let me poke around a little bit on the brain stuff and the cognitive reserve and protection.
Yeah.
Now, I know this is not your work, so I'm just kind of speaking to the general issues. So you say that the bilingual effect is not obviously apparent in brain structure and brain activity. Has anyone looked about that to test claims about cognitive reserve and protection from Alzheimer's? Because that really has a lot of new stance on that, looking at loss of grey matter and looking at as you declines, you get more bilateral activation.
Yes.
Has anyone looked at bilingualism?
Yeah, there are studies by Multilanguage in Italy, San Raffaele, Perani, you know, and others, showing that with specific populations. I mean, they compare a bilingual from with monolinguals, Italian, I think. Yeah, I mean, there are some studies showing that there is a kind of protection in certain areas of the brain. So more density, more volume, volume increases, density decreases with age anyway. But it looks like that some studies, small studies, to be honest with you, and probably not really. I asked Julian this question actually. Are these people from different socioeconomic statuses? I mean, what do we know about these participants? And the question I had is that no, I mean, there is no real data on the history of participants. So we know that from Hong Kong, they speak English and Cantonese. But it's not really clear. What is clear is that according to these studies, there might be some specific areas of the brain, especially in the frontal cortex, that they show a difference that can be associated with brain protection as a consequence of bilingualism. But is it just bilingualism?
Whether is this proximal use about are you using two languages when you're 70, or is it to do with how you your brain about using two languages when you're a child?
Across the lifespan. So these people, what I know, what I learned from these studies is that these people, they were bilingual throughout their life.
So you can't tell in that because there is some aging literature saying the protective effect is observable. This is UK data, longitudinal data in Scotland. That the protective effect is, you can look at it at children's IQ at age 11.
Yeah.
But it's early developmental effects which then play out as robustness to aging effects.
These studies are not neuroimaging. I think it's the for the database that they got in Scotland is Thomas Bach, I think, paper.
Yeah, it's Deary's group.
Yeah. I'm not sure that. Well,
So it's just
Am I
interesting.
still
It's a-
recorded? Yeah.
It's a big headline claim about bilingualism. It's
Yeah.
just something that older people should do, because that's a preservation plan. I'm just wondering about the robust. Let me ask a much more general question,
Mm,
which is about the whole field you're working in. That you're comparing individuals with two languages, multiple languages to different levels versus multilingualism. But you never get random allocation to condition. So there's always a problem about are the monolinguals and bilinguals equivalent on all other measures. How do you deal with that in your research?
in my research, in the large scale we collected data from more than 900 people through questionnaires. But then if you read the papers that we produce, we're not about 900 people. Usually they were, 200, 300, I mean, still large samples, but we just filtered out those who were not clear who they were. And what we did was just to include native bilingual speakers. So native bilingual speakers are those who learn two languages since birth, or very, very early in life. So 3 years old. So these are the people that we included, children and adults. I mean, we have also a large amount of data of other types of bilinguals that we haven't yet used. But the papers that we produced were just dedicated to native bilingualism. Otherwise, I mean, we introduced confounds, even the work of other colleagues who didn't find the bilingual advantage in bilinguals. Some other authors, the main criticism is that, oh, we don't know if the people who you tested are really bilinguals or not, because you didn't provide enough information about, who they were. And this is the main issue. I mean, either we have a long questionnaire in which we do all the checks. It would be also ideal to test, all participants' proficiency in their own language. Sometimes not possible. In our case, it was not possible whatsoever because we targeted multicultural bilinguals. So if you target Italian-English bilinguals, you can test them, I can test them in Italian and in English, that's fine. But if you have people from, I don't know, 30 different nationalities with 30 different languages, you can't do that. So you need to rely on questionnaires. And I don't really like that, but this is what it's a difficult field. Yeah, probably I should do something else. But it's interesting, for example, to move away from this bilingual advantage hypothesis that generated such a hassle and problems, and see other kind of dimensions, right? Like the tolerance of ambiguity, social emotional development in children, biliteracy as well. For example, when I tested adults, I know that they are biliterate, right? Because they are in professional jobs, so they know how to write in English and in Italian. Fantastic. But children are a completely different story. But when we do a developmental trajectory, we put bilinguals with biliterate. It's a bit messy, but what can we do? I mean, I tried that it's not biliterate. But here with these schools, we have the opportunity also to complete the trajectory with something that is more consistent with the adults, right? Bashing. I just returned from Spain. The sky was blue. Yeah, good food. Sorry.
Welcome back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Guys, any more questions? Come on.
I have a question that's slightly unrelated from again, different work that was published about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, looking at also the longitudinal trajectory of the connectivity within the frontal lobe of children who were then tested and showed consistently full readers, as opposed to children who were compensated dyslexics or had reading problems but managed. And they showed that the children who had more dense connectivity between the left and right hemispheres and the frontal lobe tended to become compensated readers rather than persistently poor readers. And I was wondering, given the bilingual advantage, the function, whether there was a relationship between connectivity.
And this is actually in one of her paper, Bialystok, pointed out. So if there is a bilingual advantage for executive function, that means that also frontal part of the brain may mature a bit early, may connect better and early. So in turn, that will provide a learning advantage at early stages compared to monolingual education or monolingual upbringing. Yeah, but I mean, if I show you my data, I mean, hundreds of bilingual children compared to monolingual children, English monolingual children, they are exactly comparable. And they are also comparable on measures that are supposed to be more negative, like, vocabulary acquisition or verbal fluency, in which, bilingual should be at disadvantage here, because vocabulary develops a bit differently, of course. You need to learn more words. And verbal fluency, retrieval, which is associated also to executive function, can be a disadvantage in bilingual speakers. I didn't find any significant result, which was a result anyway, because it got published, which is fine. But there was nothing really to report with native bilinguals. Different story could be with people like me, but you are native, right?
For one of my two.
Yeah. Okay. So you are, polyglot. So if you see another complication, I mean, there are people that we call bilinguals, but actually they speak 3-4 languages. And, there are studies showing, for example, that there are if there is an advantage, it's 1, 2, but from 3 onwards is the same. So there is no additive kind of advantage if there is an advantage. But when we put all the bilinguals together, sometimes we have trilingual. And we report in the subject description, I mean, 25 were trilingual, right? But they were collapsed into the bilinguals. Again, I want to go to Spain.
Right. Well, after you finish with bilingualism, you can move into trilingualism. Smaller samples, granted.
Maybe not.
Are you aware that there's more detailed data on languages spoken in the SCAMP study now?
Sorry, say it again.
We have detailed data for the SCAMP participants about the languages they speak from the National People Database now. Are you aware of that?
No.
New data for you.
Yeah, well,
Really?
It's pretty detailed.
Really?
Yeah, and there's
Okay.
some languages that are quite frequent, and I think
All right.
it has a record of all the languages, but they're recorded.
So you're telling me that I shouldn't go to Spain as yet. All right, okay.
What to do?
No, I would be happy to take a look at it. Yeah, but are they different participants or the same participants that I already analyzed?
The same participants.
But with more detailed linguistic.
Yeah.
Wow,
So
that's
like what languages they actually speak.
oh, that's that
And
would be
educational outcomes.
oh,
Oh, yeah.
real data.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
And we can see whether any link between the languages they use and educational outcomes is mediated by executive functions.
wow. Yeah,
If you're interested.
I'm gonna call my wife and say, okay, yeah, cancel the booking. No, really, no, I would be very interested. Yeah. How can we do it? Where can we start?
I have the data.
You have the data.
Yes,
So she's the one. I'll send you an email tomorrow or tonight, man. I don't know, on the train back to Cambridge.
Do we have time for one more? There's a question in the chat.
Sorry?
There's a question in the chat.
Where
If
is
we
it?
have time for one more.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
So
I have, yeah.
the question is, how about those multilinguals who can a language but cannot speak or write that language? Is there any advantage in that?
Yeah, they are called, I think, everything is categorized in our world. We like categories, right? They are called receptive bilinguals, I think. And there are bilinguals who maybe learn a language when they were young, then they didn't practice anymore. They kind of forgot the language. But when, the language is somewhat refreshed or whatever, it's still there, right? So they prefer not to use the second language because they don't feel comfortable. I mean, there are also individual differences here, to be honest. I've got cases of children who perfectly speak English and Spanish, for example, but they don't like speaking Spanish. They feel shy, I don't know. But they are bilinguals. Yeah.
So they would display if there was an advantage, they would display.
Oh, yeah. If the advantage, well, we shouldn't use this. If there is an effect, probably it can be detected if the bilingual person switches languages all the time. If you function as a monolingual, you are still categorized as a receptive bilingual because you are bilingual. Even if you do sign language, you are a bimodal bilingual, right? But maybe you don't see the positive effect of bilingualism because you don't do inhibition, activation all the time, which is probably the main ingredient for a positive effect that Bialystok detects all the time, and I don't. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the proposal is that the inhibitory control advantage comes from production. From the productive, not from the receptive.
No, but I mean, there is research showing that both languages are active all the time in comprehension. Okay. And the people that actually did this kind of research in Holland, right? And this is true because this is a fact. But obviously, the switch, it would be in production because this is when you suppress a language and you activate the other one. We don't know exactly where the inhibition activation occurs. David Green says at lemma levels, if I remember from my old studies.
Word units.
Yes. But in comprehension, there is no switch, really. We process both languages. They're always active in parallel, yeah?
Makes a lot of sense.
Well,
Your answer.
so who's this person?
In the chat.
Oh, thank you. It makes lots of sense for her. Or maybe not for me. I need to study more. I mean, when you finish your PhD, who was the person who told me? Cathy Price, I think. I said, I finished my PhD. And she said, yeah, right. You finish your PhD and you start another one, and then another one, and then another one. And your life is going to be a PhD. So yeah, she was right.
All right, should we wrap up? Thank Roberto again. Fantastic.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
We had 50 participants on Zoom, now we have 14 left.
14.
14.
So those 14 for hanging on.
They got bored. Thank you for coming. Wow.